All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich CELENZA. Thanks for checking out the Rich CELENZA Show. So, what I'm going to call this podcast is my mom or my mother gave me the life I needed. And the reason I want to bring this up is because I think when it comes to a lot of, I can't say kids because we're all adults now, but a lot of people I know sometimes blame their parents for their upbringing or their surroundings. And I can understand that. Believe me, I've been around a lot of family members that were very close to me, that I've even lived with. And I've gone through the being surrounded by alcoholics and drug addicts and I guess you could say bipolar, a lot of different things, right? Sickness, all these different things, living with certain types of people that are my family, that I love very much. And just didn't at certain times maybe get along or had the patience, whatever the case may be. But what I'm going to talk about is my mother, giving me everything she could give me, which was actually amazing for me. I think my mother, because my mother was divorced at a young age, and her and I was very young when they got divorced. I don't know, 5, 6 years old. And I think my mother sometimes was sad that I didn't have a father around all the time, right? And then my father ended up moving to Florida, back and forth a couple times, which my father was great for me. I have no problems. I talk about it, and I'm very fortunate. I had an amazing childhood. I had both a massive family on both sides. I was fortunate enough to have immigrant Italian grandparents that I got to spend a lot of time with, great-grandparents, I should say. Just really... it was just, I would have never changed anything. And I think what my mother never realized, maybe she'll listen to this podcast, is she did everything, I think, for the most part, perfect for me. She always let me spend so much time with my family. She always went out of her way for me. She always got me in organized sports. And I loved sports more than anything. And she dedicated a lot of her time to making sure I was involved with every sport I wanted to play, which was numerous amounts of sports. From soccer to football to baseball to tennis to wrestling to boxing to basketball. The list goes on and on. I mean, I even did floor hockey. But here's the thing I think she looks at. And I think a lot of parents sometimes feel maybe that they failed regarding certain things. It could be like, I wish I was tougher on my kids regarding education. I wish I would have put my kids in, maybe better schooling. I wish I lived in a different area. My kids would have maybe ended up this way. Whatever it is. Here's the deal with me. I didn't like school. I've discussed this before. And I think my mother wishes I would have liked school a lot more. Or maybe I was more interested in education. All right? And she knew I wasn't excelling in that. I just was not a good student. It was very obvious, right? But the thing was, what she kept doing to me was helping me build confidence in everything that I was really excelling in. And sure, I've had arguments with my mother, and sure, you go through different, situations with your parents, good or bad, especially when you're, a mother without any man around at that point in time, and you're raising a child. And then, it's not easy. A young boy in the 70s, right? And then there's a lot of different influences coming my way as well about the streets. I think my mother's number one rule is she didn't want to lose me near the streets. And it could have happened very easily, and I liked the streets. A lot of my family members were from the streets. And I also had a lot of wealthy family members as well. And I used to hang out in good areas, truthfully. And she moved me into a very incredible area in LaGrange when I was younger. It's a very upper middle class neighborhood outside the Chicagoland area. And then I ended up going to an all-Italian neighborhood, which I love very much, Melrose Park. And I was just, my mother always wanted the best for me. She took me to great schools. In LaGrange, they had some of the best grade school and middle schools, I think, in Illinois. Very good. And then I went to a private high school that was kind of really well-renowned, I guess you could say, well-known high school, private Catholic high school. So, I still think, because of maybe the way I turned out to a certain degree, because I was one of very few that never really excelled in college. And I went 1 year and I didn't even last. I think I lasted a semester. I just despised school. And a lot of my friends went on to become wealthy. Some ended up lawyers, some accountants, some in many different things, engineers. Just a lot did very well, including a lot of my family members. And I've kind of done things my own way. What's kind of crazy, I think that kind of shocks her, is someone like myself went and then maybe wrote a couple books, which kind of threw her. And I think even, I never really talked a lot about making films, and I went on to make films. And I did all these things that I wanted to do throughout my life. And a lot of that was because the way my mother programmed me, and my father. And it's really about, she installed confidence in me. I think sometimes maybe she installed so much confidence in me that I was very stubborn and I wasn't intimidated. So when I came to school, I kind of knew where I stood with it. Even in high school, I knew I didn't want to necessarily go to college. I knew I wanted to go into business. I knew I quickly wanted to start making money and doing all these different types of things, living a different lifestyle than, say, college kids. Some of my closest friends all went to college, a lot of them. And I had no interest, even though I visited colleges, and like I just said, a lot of my friends, not a few, all went to college. But the reason I bring this up, let me get some water. I think a lot of times people either blame their parents or they don't really realize all the stuff they did for them. And I know we hear that all the time. It could be your grandparents too. It could be your siblings. I think a lot of times the life they gave us was amazing. We just took it for granted or we didn't realize it. A lot of times when we become parents, then we kind of realize how unbelievable our parents were, obviously. Now, I'm not saying everybody has great parents. There's a lot of shitty parents out there too, don't get me wrong. Okay? If you've gone through that, I'm sorry. That I do. I feel really bad for you. There's nothing I can do. But if you did have shitty parents, hopefully if you are a parent, you want to be a better parent than what you had. But put that aside, I remember one time I had a close friend, and he was always fighting, and he was much older than me. He was like a grandfather figure, and he was always arguing with his son. And then finally he said he finally had a talk with his father. And his son said to him, he had a talk with his son. So the grandfather figure said to me what his son told him, which shocked me. He said the reason he was mad at him for so many years, for literally decades, and this guy was like at his 40s at this point, maybe even 50s, he said he never took him fishing. He never even knew this. He had to raise a family of 4. He was a Navy guy, and he never knew his son wanted to go fishing. Of course he would have took him fishing. But he always wanted to fish. He never asked his dad, and he had a gripe all these years with them, which sounds kind of funny now that I look at it too. But the point being is a lot of times, like, if you looked at that, I'm looking at that like that's absolutely crazy, because if you looked at all the things that grandparent figure, that grandfather figure to me, all the things he did for his families, all the places he took them all over the world, and he spent all this money and then sending them to school and clothing them and feeding them. His son was actually mad about one small, in our opinion, stupid thing, but in him it really affected him. But you may be going through this too. You may be upset at your parents for maybe things they did in their past, right? Or things that they said. I get it. I think everybody gets it. But the truth is, I think if there's ever been a time that people need a pass, it's parents. I really do. I really think we underestimate. I don't care from the minute we're born, changing our diapers, to our medical bills, to taking us to the dentist, to making sure we're protected, to paying rent or paying a mortgage, helping us get our first car, helping us groom us. The list goes on and on and on, and I just think people, it's just always expected. And I will say one thing. I remember my father, and I thought it was one of the best lessons he ever taught me. And some people may take it and look at it the wrong way, but I used to think that I was owed something from my father, and I think one time I wanted something, and I said, "You owe me." And he looked at me and he said, "I don't owe you anything in life. I gave you life. If anything, you owe me." It wasn't a serious conversation. It was almost more comical. But the reality was, it was kind of truthful. Why would my parents owe me anything after everything they've given me? And I think a lot of us have lost sight on that. And I left my mother at a very young age, like, well, not very young, but at like 18. But I was coming back and forth to Florida at like 15, spending a lot of time. So I was kind of living. I wasn't living in Florida, but I was coming I was coming there for summer schools, and I was spending a lot of holidays there with my father. And I think maybe it hurt my mom's feelings that I moved with my father to Florida, but then I lived on my own. But my point being, after this podcast, is I couldn't have asked for a better mother. I know my mother loved me, and she always had my back. My grandmother as well, and she didn't have a man around either. And it was they gave me the exact life that they could give me that worked perfectly for me. I think if they would have forced me maybe to do other things that I didn't want to do, that may have actually pushed me to do other things that I may have hurt myself, or I may have gotten aggravated. Who knows what I would have done. But I knew all the time they always had my best interest. They loved me. And I would say for a lot of people out there, your parents and your grandparents are the same way. Even though you may not have looked at it that way, or maybe because you had beefs, or maybe because you've had issues, I get it. But I'm just here to tell you, if you have your parents still around, I talk about it. Try to talk to them every day. I try to talk to my mom, or we text each other every day. Same with my father. But, don't take for granted your parents, and definitely don't take for granted everything they did for you, especially when you're younger, because I do think we forget about a lot of shit. Or we think more about what we resented maybe in our past than all the things that we were given and that we loved. And they gave us that. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'll talk to everyone later. That's all. Mother's Day's coming up, actually, I think in about a week and a half. So don't forget about that. All right, take care.